Richard Starkey, MBE, known professionally as Ringo Starr, is an English musician, singer, songwriter and actor who gained worldwide fame as the drummer for the Beatles. He occasionally sang lead vocals, usually for one song on an album, including With a Little Help from My Friends, Yellow Submarine, and the cover of Act Naturally. He also wrote the Beatles songs Don't Pass Me By and Octopus's Garden, and is credited as a co-writer of others, such as What Goes On and Flying. Starr was twice afflicted by life-threatening illnesses during childhood, and as a result of prolonged hospitalizations fell behind in school. In 1955, he entered the workforce and briefly held a position with British Rail before securing an apprenticeship at a Liverpool equipment manufacturer. Soon afterwards, he became interested in the UK skiffle craze, developing a fervent admiration for the genre. In 1957, he co-founded his first band, the Eddie Clayton Skiffle Group, which earned several prestigious local bookings before the fad succumbed to American rock and roll by early 1958. When the Beatles formed in 1960, Starr was a member of another Liverpool group, Rory Storm and the Hurricanes. After achieving moderate success with that band in the UK and Hamburg, he quit the Hurricanes and joined the Beatles in August 1962, replacing Pete Best. Starr played key roles in the Beatles films and appeared in numerous others. After the band's breakup in 1970, he released several successful singles including the US number 4 hit, It Don't Come Easy, and number 1's, Photograph, and You're 16. In 1972, he released his most successful UK single, Back Off Boogaloo, which peaked at number 2. He achieved commercial and critical success with his 1973 album Ringo, which was a top 10 release in both the UK and the US. He has been featured in a number of documentaries and hosted television shows. He also narrated the first 2 series of the children's television program Thomas and Friends and portrayed Mr. Conductor during the first season of the PBS children's television series Shining Time Station. Since 1989, he has toured with 12 variations of Ringo Starr and his all-star band. Starr's creative contribution to music has received praise from drummers such as Phil Collins, who described him as a great musician, and Steve Smith, who commented, "Before Ringo, drum stars were measured by their soloing ability and virtuosity. Ringo's popularity brought forth a new paradigm. We started to see the drummer as an equal participant in the compositional aspect. His parts are so signature to the songs that you can listen to a Ringo drum part without the rest of the music and still identify the song." He was inducted into the Modern Drummer Hall of Fame in 1998. In 2011, Rolling Stone readers named Starr the 5th greatest drummer of all time. Starr, who was previously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a Beatle in 1988, was inducted for his solo career in 2015, making him one of 21 performers inducted more than once. 1940 to 56. Early life. Richard Starkey was born on the 7th of July 1940, at 9 Madryn Street, in Dingle, Liverpool. He is the only child of confectioners Elsie and Richard Starkey. Elsie enjoyed singing and dancing, a hobby that she shared with her husband, an avid fan of swing. Prior to the birth of their son, whom they nicknamed Richie, the couple had spent much of their free time on the local ballroom circuit. But soon after his birth their regular outings ended. Elsie adopted an overprotective approach to raising her son that bordered on fixation. Subsequently, Big Richie, as Starkey's father became known, lost interest in his family, choosing instead to spend long hours drinking and dancing in pubs, sometimes for several consecutive days. In 1944, in an effort to reduce their housing costs, his family moved to another neighborhood in the Dingle, 10 Admiral Grove. Soon afterwards, His parents separated, and they divorced within the year. Starkey later stated that he has no real memories of his father, who made little effort to bond with him, visiting as few as 3 times thereafter. Elsie found it difficult to survive on her ex-husband's support payments of 30 shillings a week. So she took on several menial jobs cleaning houses before securing a position as a local barmaid, an occupation that she held for 12 years. At age 6, Starkey developed appendicitis. Following a routine appendectomy, he contracted peritonitis, causing him to fall into a coma that lasted for days. His recovery spanned 12 months, which he spent away from his family at Liverpool's Myrtle Street Children's Hospital. Upon his discharge in May 1948, his mother allowed him to stay home, causing him to miss school. At age 8, he remained illiterate, with a poor grasp of mathematics. His lack of education contributed to a feeling of alienation at school, which resulted in him regularly playing truant at Sefton Park. After several years of twice-weekly tutoring from his surrogate sister and neighbour, Marie Maguire Crawford, Starkey had nearly caught up to his peers academically, but in 1953, he contracted tuberculosis and was admitted to a sanatorium, where he remained for 2 years. During his stay, the medical staff made an effort to stimulate motor activity and relieve boredom by encouraging their patients to join the hospital band, leading to his first exposure to a percussion instrument, a makeshift mallet made from a cotton bobbin that he used to strike the cabinets next to his bed. Soon afterwards, he grew increasingly interested in drumming, receiving a copy of the Allen Ainsworth song, Bedtime for Drums, as a convalescence gift from Crawford. Starkey commented, "I was in the hospital band. That's where I really started playing. I never wanted anything else from there on. My grandparents gave me a mandolin and a banjo, but I didn't want 'em. My grandfather gave me a harmonica. We had a piano, nothing, only the drums." Starkey attended St. Silas, a Church of England primary school near his house where his classmates nicknamed him Lazarus, and later Dingle Vale Secondary Modern School, where he showed an aptitude for art and drama, as well as practical subjects including mechanics. As a result of the prolonged hospitalizations, he fell behind his peers scholastically and was ineligible for the 11+ qualifying examination required for attendance at a grammar school. On the 17th of April 1953, Starkey's mother married Harry Graves, an ex-Londoner who had moved to Liverpool following the failure of his first marriage. Graves, an impassioned fan of big band music and the vocalists, introduced Starkey to recordings by Dinah Shore, Sarah Vaughan and Billy Daniels. Graves stated that he and Ritchie never had an unpleasant exchange between them. Starkey later commented, "He was great. I learned gentleness from Harry." After the extended hospital stay following Starkey's recovery from tuberculosis, he did not return to school, preferring instead to stay at home and listen to music while playing along by beating biscuit tins with sticks. Beatles biographer Bob Spitz described Starkey's upbringing as a Dickensian chronicle of misfortune. Houses in the area were poorly ventilated, postage stamp-sized, patched together by crumbling plaster walls, with a rear door that opened onto an outhouse. Crawford commented, "Like all of the families who lived in the Dingle, he was a part of an ongoing struggle to survive. The children who lived there spent much of their time at Prince's Park, escaping the soot-filled air of their coal-fueled neighborhood, adding to their difficult circumstances. Violent crime was an almost constant concern for people living in one of the oldest and poorest inner-city districts in Liverpool." Starkey later commented, "You kept your head down, your eyes open, and you didn't get in anybody's way." After his return home from the sanatorium in late 1955, Starkey entered the workforce but was lacking in motivation and discipline. His initial attempts at gainful employment proved unsuccessful. In an effort to secure himself some warm clothes, he briefly held a railway worker's job, which came with an employer-issued suit. He was supplied with a hat but no uniform and, unable to pass the physical examination, he was laid off and granted unemployment benefits. He then found work as a waiter serving drinks on a day boat that travelled from Liverpool to North Wales. But his fear of conscription into military service led him to quit the job, not wanting to give the Royal Navy the impression that he was suitable for seafaring work. In mid-1956, Graves secured Starkey a position as an apprentice machinist at a Liverpool equipment manufacturer. While working at the facility, Starkey befriended Roy Trafford, and the two bonded over their shared interest in music. Trafford introduced Starkey to skiffle, and he quickly became a fervent admirer. 1957–61. First bands. Soon after Trafford piqued Starkey's interest in skiffle, the two began rehearsing songs in the manufacturing plant's cellar during their lunch breaks. Trafford recalled, "I played a guitar, and Richie just made a noise on a box. Sometimes, he just slapped a biscuit tin with some keys, or banged on the backs of chairs." The pair were joined by Starkey's neighbor and co-worker, the guitarist Eddie Miles, forming the Eddie Miles Band, later renamed Eddie Clayton and the Clayton Squares after a Liverpool landmark. The band performed popular skiffle songs such as Rock Island Line and Walking Cane, with Starkey raking a thimble across a washboard, creating primitive, driving rhythms. Starkey enjoyed dancing as his parents had years earlier, and he and Trafford briefly took dance lessons at two schools, though the lessons were short-lived. They provided Starkey and Trafford with an introduction that allowed them to dance competently while enjoying nights out on the town. On Christmas Day 1957, Graves gave Starkey a second-hand drum kit consisting of a snare drum, bass drum and a makeshift cymbal fashioned from an old rubbish bin lid. Although basic and crude, the kit facilitated his progression as a musician while increasing the commercial potential of the Eddie Clayton Band, who went on to book several prestigious local gigs before the skiffle craze faded in early 1958 as American rock and roll became popular in the UK. In November 1959, Starkey joined Al Caldwell's Texans, a skiffle group who were looking for someone with a proper drum kit so that the group could transition from one of Liverpool's best-known skiffle acts to a full-fledged rock and roll band. They had begun playing local clubs as the Raging Texans, then Jet Storm and the Raging Texans before settling on Rory Storm and the Hurricanes soon before recruiting Starkey. About this time he adopted the stage name Ringo Starr, derived from the rings he wore and also because it implied a country and western influence. His drum solos were billed as Star Time. By early 1960 the Hurricanes had become one of Liverpool's leading bands. In May, they were offered a 3-month residency at a Butlins holiday camp in Wales. Although initially reluctant to accept the residency and end his 5-year machinist apprenticeship that he had begun 4 years earlier, Starr eventually agreed to the arrangement. The Butlins gig led to other opportunities for the band, including an unpleasant tour of U.S. Air Force bases in France about which Starr commented, "The French don't like the British, at least I didn't like them." The Hurricanes became so successful that when initially offered a highly coveted residency in Hamburg, they turned it down because of their prior commitment with Butlins. They eventually accepted, joining the Beatles at Bruno Koschmider's Kaiserkeller on 1 October 1960, where Starr first met the band. Storm's Hurricanes were given top billing over the Beatles, who also received less pay. Starr performed with the Beatles during a few stand-in engagements while in Hamburg. On 15 October 1960, he drummed with John Lennon, Paul McCartney and George Harrison, recording with them for the first time while backing Hurricanes singer Lou Walters on the George Gershwin aria, Summertime. During Starr's first stay in Hamburg he also met Tony Sheridan, who valued his drumming abilities to the point of asking Starr to leave the Hurricanes and join his band.